Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're focusing on a surprisingly complex question, one that plays out in millions of backyards every winter. And that is, what do wild birds actually want when they show up at your feeder?
It's a huge seasonal challenge for them. As temperatures drop and, natural food supplies just vanish, wild birds face these massive energy demands.
Right, whether they're small birds just trying to survive the night or bigger ones getting ready for these just strenuous migratory flights.
And that's where supplemental feeding, that backyard feeder you have, becomes so important.
And we know it works, right? I mean, studies confirm there are real benefits.
Oh, absolutely. Things like increased antioxidants, reduced stress, even faster feather growth.
But there's always a catch.
There is. You have to remember the trade-off. When you feed birds, you can increase the density of the population in that one spot.
Which raises the risk of, diseases spreading.
Exactly. Infectious disease transmission. So if you're going to feed them, you have a responsibility. Meticulous cleaning, good maintenance, it's all part of the deal.
A noble cause, but a real responsibility. Okay, so for our mission today, we're doing a deep dive into an observational experiment. It was conducted in South Surrey, British Columbia, out in Western Canada.
And the researchers there decided to sort of test the market. They gave wild birds a choice between 4 of the most common seeds you can buy.
A real preference test.
It was. They compared sunflower seed, millet, hemp seed, and peanuts. And the core question of the study, and for us today, is really, is preference just about nutrition?
Does more energy or more protein automatically mean it's the seed they're going to choose?
That's the question. Does the raw nutritional data, lipids, carbs, all of it, directly dictate what the birds eat?
Okay, let's unpack this setup. I want to see if birds are really just chasing calories.
Well, before they could even set up the feeders, the researchers had to control for some things we already know influence a bird's choice.
Things beyond just taste or nutrition.
Exactly. Physical barriers, for instance. We know that bird morphology, the size and the depth of their bill, that dictates what size of seed they can even handle.
And there are chemical factors too, right?
Right. The presence of they're called anti-nutritional compounds. They can really put a bird off, even if a seed is packed with calories, because those compounds just interfere with digestion.
So they needed to level the playing field, make every seed equally easy to get to. How'd they do that?
It was pretty meticulous, actually. They built 4 identical circular tray feeders. They hung them about 1 meter apart on the same tree, which created what they call a multiple offer design.
So all 4 seeds were available at once?
All at once, 30 grams of each. And this is critical, they only used hulled seeds.
So no shells. That takes shell hardness completely out of the equation.
Precisely. Makes them all equally easy to access.
But wait, peanuts are way bigger than something like millet. They still had to deal with the size difference.
They did. And the rigor here it's kind of fascinating. To promote that physical uniformity, they literally took a rubber mallet and just crushed the peanuts.
No way. They smashed the peanuts just to make it a fair fight.
They did. They were really dedicated to making sure that if a bird passed up a peanut, it wasn't just because it was too big to grab quickly.
I love that.
Darn.
Total dedication to the science.
Okay.
So who showed up to this very well-controlled buffet?
Well, the observation period was 5 one-hour trials, and the bird population was very, very concentrated.
Okay.
We're talking 90% of all the interactions came from smaller, non-migratory resident birds.
Like the ones you see all the time.
Your classic backyard birds, black-capped chickadees, and house sparrows.
So those small birds are really the main characters here. Their needs, quick energy, surviving the cold, that's going to drive the data.
Exactly. The other 10% included some larger birds like the red-throated thrush and the Steller's jay.
And what was the behavior like? Were they just sitting there and eating?
No, it was mostly grab and go. A bird would fly in, take a single seed, carry it off to eat, and then come back for another.
And as the trials went on, did they notice a pattern?
They did. Especially the small birds, they were increasingly going back to the same feeder over and over again.
Which gives us a pretty big hint about who won the popularity contest right away.
It does. They were all flocking to the sunflower seed feeder.
Okay, let's move beyond just the hints and get into the cold, hard data.
Yeah.
After the 5 trials, they weighed what was left. What was the definitive ranking?
The difference in what was eaten it was really striking and statistically significant. The overall consumption data, when you average it all out, gives a very clear ranking.
Okay, here's with the scorecard. Highest to lowest.
Sunflower seed was the undisputed winner, a mean consumption of 2.5 grams.
2.5, got it.
Next up was millet at 1.88 grams. Then hemp seed followed pretty closely at 1.56 grams.
And the loser?
And peanuts, despite all that effort with the rubber mallet, came in dead last, just 0.74 grams on average.
Wow, that's a huge gap. I mean, 2.5 grams for sunflower and less than a gram for peanuts. That's not random chance.
Not at all. The researchers ran a Friedman test, which is a statistical analysis, and it confirmed the difference was robust. The birds were definitely making deliberate choices.
So we know peanuts lost, big time. But what about the top spot? Was sunflower just so much better than millet that it was a blowout?
And this is where the fine print gets really interesting, especially if you're the one buying the seed.
Okay.
We know for a fact peanuts were significantly less preferred than all the other three seeds, and sunflower was significantly preferred over both hemp and peanuts.
That confirms our winner and our loser pretty clearly.
But, and this is the key nuance for anyone listening, the consumption of sunflower seed was not statistically different from millet.
Right, really?
And millet consumption was not statistically different from hemp seed.
Huh. So while sunflower was eaten the most in sheer volume, statistically it wasn't a dominant winner over millet and hemp.
That's it. You have a clear loser in peanuts, a clear volume winner in sunflower, but that middle tier was basically in a statistical tie with the top spot.
Which shows that both sunflower and millet were really attractive options for the birds.
Exactly. And that brings us to the real mystery here. Why did peanuts fail so badly, and why was millet, which you don't always think of as a premium seed, such a strong competitor?
This leads us right back to that original hypothesis. You know, if a bird is trying to survive the winter, it should be going for fat and carbs.
Yeah.
The most energy.
That's the logical assumption, yes. Preference should correlate directly with the nutritional content.
So let's look at the raw data. This is based on 100-gram portions. See if we can figure out why the birds broke the model.
Okay, let's start with overall energy. Kilocalories.
Okay.
Sunflower was highest, clocking in at 600 kilocal. Peanuts and hemp were next, both in the 500 to 550 range.
And millet.
Look at millet. It was the clear energy lightweight. It bottomed out at 356 kilocal.
Okay, so that's our first big red flag. Millet was the second most eaten seed, but it's the least energy dense by a lot. The simple energy idea is already in trouble.
Now let's break it down by the energy sources, starting with lipids, the fat content.
Right, stored energy.
Peanuts were the absolute king of fat, 73 grams of fat per 100 grams of seed.
Wow.
Sunflower and hemp were high too, around 50 grams each. But millet, barely any, just over 1 gram of fat.
This is where it gets really weird. The highest fat option, by a mile, was peanuts, and yet it was eaten the least.
It's a massive disconnect. The most important source for stored energy is in the least desirable seed.
If the goal was just to get the most calories, peanuts should have won, but they didn't.
They absolutely didn't.
So what about carbs, the quick-burning, immediate energy?
Here, millet completely flips the script. It dominated the carb count at 73 grams. Peanuts were next at 53 grams. Sunflower was actually pretty low in comparison, around 20 grams.
You have these optimized seeds, millet for quick energy, peanuts for fat storage, and the birds chose sunflower, which is sort of good at both, but not the best at either.
And that is the central puzzle the study uncovered. The researchers calculated if there was any reliable statistical link between preference and any single nutrient.
Energy, protein, lipids, or carbs?
Any of them. And what did they find?
What did the data say?
The data showed that, statistically, you could not prove that any single one of those had a direct, reliable link to what the birds ate.
So they weren't just picking the highest fat seed or the highest carb seed. The simple scoreboard idea failed. Why?
Well, lipids, which you'd think would be most desired for winter energy, only showed a weak positive relationship with consumption, and carbohydrates actually showed a weak negative relationship.
Which just signals that the birds are dealing with trade-offs that are way more complex than just adding up calories.
Exactly.
So if it's not just about the highest fat content, we have to look deeper. Let's start with the spectacular failure of the peanut. If it's not the energy, why did they reject it?
This brings us back to those potential anti-nutritional compounds we mentioned earlier.
Right.
While this study didn't measure them specifically, the existing literature strongly suggests that peanuts can contain secondary compounds. And these compounds actively restrict the biochemical reactions a bird needs for digestion.
So even if the peanut has 73 grams of fat, if the bird has to spend too much energy just to access that fat, the meal isn't worth it.
It's not worth the cost, especially when there's an easier option sitting right next door.
It's like buying furniture that's ready to go versus the one you have to spend 3 hours assembling. In a high-stress winter, the easy option wins.
That's a perfect analogy, and it immediately explains those weak correlations. It brings us to the crucial difference in how a bird's body actually processes these nutrients.
Let's talk about that digestion process.
Okay, think of carbohydrates, like high amount in millet, as kindling for a fire.
Okay, quick burning, easy to light.
Minimal effort. They get absorbed through a simple, passive process in the gut. They provide immediate, low-cost energy.
And that immediate energy is perfect for a small, non-migratory bird like a chickadee, right? It just needs a quick boost to survive a cold night.
And since those small birds dominated this study, it makes perfect sense that millet was so competitive with sunflower.
So how do lipids, the fats, compare to that?
Lipids are the dense, slow-burning logs. They're high reward, offering sustained long-term energy.
Nut.
But they require a much higher energetic cost up front to process. The bird needs a whole series of complex biochemical reactions, a full enzymatic breakdown, just to get to that stored energy.
So the smaller resident birds that need immediate survival fuel might actually prefer the low-cost, quick-burn carbs from millet, even if the total calorie count is lower.
While migratory birds who need to pack on stored energy for a huge trip are probably prioritizing those high-cost, high-reward lipids.
And because this experiment had a mix of birds with these totally different needs, quick fuel versus long-term storage, no single nutrient was ever going to show a perfect correlation with what was eaten.
That's the key. It wasn't that the birds were ignoring nutrition, it's that the flock, as a whole, had conflicting but equally valid nutritional goals.
And that ultimately is why sunflower seeds still won the overall consumption contest.
It's the final verdict. It wasn't the best in any single category. Peanuts had more fat, millet had more carbs, but sunflower had the most advantageous combination of everything.
It's the universal choice, the well-balanced option.
Exactly. High overall energy, a good balance of easy-to-get carbs and necessary stored fat, and, crucially, none of those deterring secondary compounds you might find in peanuts.
So sunflower is the most robust, general-purpose seed because it helps the greatest variety of birds with all their different needs.
It maximizes its attractiveness at the feeder.
That gives us a much clearer picture of what is actually happening at the feeder. So the main takeaway here is that while you might think I'll just buy the highest fat seed, this study shows the choice is less about raw calories.
And much more about these complex biological trade-offs. The digestive costs the birds have to weigh. And sunflower seeds, because of that versatile balance, just prove to be the universal champion.
Now, the researchers were clear that a study like this has its limits.
Oh, of course. For one thing, they didn't know for sure which specific species ate how much of each seed, they just had the total.
So what did they suggest for future research?
Well, more sampling, obviously. Maybe using sturdier, more weather-resistant feeders. And most importantly, using video cameras.
To actually quantify consumption by species, to see if the chickadees were really going for millet and the jays for something else.
Exactly. And I find their other suggestion really intriguing. They suggested shifting to a single offer design for future work.
What does that mean?
A multiple offer test is great for seeing preference when there's a choice. But a single offer experiment where the birds have no alternative would force them to eat a nutrient-specific diet.
And that would let researchers draw much stronger conclusions about how, say, a diet of only high-lipid seeds really affects their biology.
It would isolate the variables much more clearly.
Fantastic. Okay, now for one final thought for you to chew on. We know that the small, non-migratory chickadees made up the vast majority of the birds in this study. And those birds likely favor quick-burn carbohydrates, while the migratory birds need to store lipids for their journey. So, if you were trying specifically to fuel only the larger migratory birds passing through your area, how might you change your seed strategy based on this data? How would you move away from the universal sunflower, even knowing the risk of those anti-nutritional compounds in some of the high-lipid options? Think about how you might target those specific high-cost, high-reward fuel sources.